Hi crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to use some old and new Lavinia Stamps products and make a Northern Lights card. Hope you enjoy! So for this card, I wanted to add some hills underneath the Northern Lights. So I used a piece of masking tape and traced over a few hills that are on one of the Lavinia Stamps masks, and then I cut this out. And normally I use ink for my backgrounds, but I thought I would try something different and use colored paper. If you're in the UK, I bought this paper from the Works. So I added 1.5 inches of masking tape at the bottom, and then I could put my hills on one side. This way, the bottom of the card is in a boring straight line. And then I can use that mask later on if I like. So to make my Northern Lights, I used 2 colors of acrylic ink. There's the Jade and the Electric Violet, and these are both from Paper Artsy. And I used a large brush for this and a tiny bit of paint, and I just pulled in strokes going from the top down, creating this sort of pattern. And then I repeated it on the bottom with long strokes going from the middle up, leaving a blue gap in the middle. I think the trick to doing this technique is not using too much paint on your paintbrush, and you just gradually build the scene. So I started with just the Jade, and then I added in the Electric Violet, just in some areas. And then I went back and forth with the 2 colors, so that I had a sort of a third color in between the two, in between the Jade and the Electric Violet. And you can add as much or as little paint as you like, but I think it works best when you have at least 2 coats of paint on the background. So you can kind of see that there are now 3 colors in this background. And I will add a little bit of sparkle as well to make it look more like the Northern Lights. So once I'm happy with the amount of paint on there, I'm going to use my heat tool and dry it off. And then I can add that sparkle in. So I used one of the Mystic sprays. This one's Golden Temple. And I did the exact same thing, putting a little bit on my paintbrush and then long strokes going from the top down and from the masking tape up. And I just did this in some areas and not all. And then I let this dry with my heat tool as well. Now for underneath my Northern Lights, I'm going to use a little bit of ink to color in that bottom part of the card. So I'm lining up my Lavinia mask there. So I've got the hills showing, and I'm going to put some Morning Mist ink at the bottom. And then I'm going to use the masking tape that I used before and line it up so that I've got a straight line. And I should mention that I kept the masking tape from before because I do plan to use it in a few moments. So once I've got that all over the bottom of the card, I can start adding some stamped images. So I'm going to line up that old masking tape here, and then use my smallest stamp, which is the Orchard Grass. Now, with all that paint on the background, you won't get a perfect image when you stamp with an acrylic block, but it doesn't matter so much with the tiny stamps like this one here. I'm just going to stamp over that hill so that I've got tiny little bits of that orchard grass peeking through. And I'll add a little bit at the corner here as well. Next, I'll add the sacred tree onto my scene, and I'm going to put it on the left-hand side here. Now with all that paint on the background, I'm going to hold this for a few seconds just to make sure it's really soaked on there before I remove it. Now you could color in the tree if you like, but I kind of like how the purple and the green paint are peeking through it. Next, I'm going to stamp this beautiful moose. His name is Oakley, and I'm going to put him in the front of my scene. And I thought it would be great if he's kind of looking at the northern lights in the background. So I'm just going to put him right in front of this tree on to the right of the tree there. Now with all that paint in the background, I'm making sure that I push firmly before I remove my stamp acrylic block. And although I got a good impression, you can see there's a few areas where that paint kind of peeks through. So I'm just using a black pencil crayon to color in the areas on his nose here and his horns and then towards his tummy. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to add a bit of shine and a bit of a reflection of the northern lights. So I added some purple pencil crayon along his back here, almost like the colors are reflecting on his silhouette. And then a little bit of turquoise as well. I used polychromo pencil crayons for this, which are oil-based like the ink. So once I'm happy that I've got a nice reflection of the northern lights on Oakley, I'm going to add in some stars. And I just used a white gel pen for this and did a few larger dots and a few smaller dots. Now I just wanted to show you some other options. So the moose on the left is just stamped once, and the moose on the right is stamped and then heat embossed with black embossing powder. And I wanted to do a kind of a combination of the two on this card. So what I did with Oakley, after he's got that pencil crayon on his back, I lined him up in my stamp platform and then added the stamp on top of his image. And with this being such a large stamp, this is actually quite easy to do. It's very easy to see the stamped area. And I'm just going to pick up the stamp with my stamp platform and then stamp the image again with Versamark clear sticky ink. And then this way I can put some clear embossing powder on top of Oakley so that that pencil crayon doesn't, it blends in more with his image. And you'll see what I mean in a moment here. So I just used clear embossing powder, got rid of the excess, and then heat embossed it. And I always like to heat emboss from the back of my image, and that way the embossing powder doesn't go flying. And now that I've got heat embossing powder on there, you can see that beautiful reflection on Oakley looks perfect, like it was supposed to be there. Now to balance out the sparkle in the sky onto the bottom of the card, I added one of the stamps. This is called the Snow Shrub, and I stamped it with the Galaxy Gold ink. And this is in a pigment ink, so it stays wet a little bit longer than some of the other inks. So it's perfect for heat embossing as well. And I thought since we have that heat embossing on Oakley, we could do the same on this snow shrub. So I'm just adding it on the bottom where I think it looks nice. And then I can add some clear embossing powder to this and heat set it. And this gives the bottom of the card a bit of interest, and it's nice and sparkly, so it ties in that Northern Lights. So I've just got a bit of a gap at the bottom that I'm going to fill in here. And I'll do the same thing, adding some clear embossing powder and then heat setting that area. And I did that off camera. Now for my sentiment, I'm going to stamp with some Nocturne ink first, and then use that Galaxy Gold ink. This sentiment says, free your inner creativity. And I did this because if you stamp with just the gold ink, it's very difficult to read on white paper. So having that Nocturne ink behind it, it gives it that perfect glow. And then I'll just add my sentiment and put this on a 5x7" card base. And I did put black around my sentiment, black paper. Now, because this is such a colorful card, I thought I would do something funny on the inside of the card and stamp Oakley again, but this time with a light purple ink. This is the Lilac Bloom color. And I'm just going to stamp them at the bottom so it looks like there's a line of moose wandering across the card. Just something funny to make the recipient laugh. And if you wanted this to be a more serious card, of course, you wouldn't use this purple, but I think it gives it a nice playful effect on the card. This stamp is so gorgeous, I just had to use it again. And now you can see the finished card here with that beautiful Northern Lights in the sky and the reflection on Oakley's back and the sparkly snow shrubs at the bottom. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!